Some people say swing is back, but the truth is it never went away. Since its heyday in the 30s and 40s, swing has mutated and evolved into styles including straight-ahead jazz, jump blues, and rockabilly. Stellar musicians like Count Basie, T-Bone Walker, Louis Jordan, Big Joe Turner, Gatemouth Brown, and dozens of others continue to find new fans and influence young musicians with every passing generation. In the next hour or so, you're going to learn how to join this tradition yourself, learning how the swing groove is assembled from the bottom up and how you can add to its most important ingredient, rhythm. So grab your guitar, loosen your tie, unbutton your spats, and get ready to jump, jive, and swing. Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Keith Wyatt and I'm going to be your guide as we explore the wonderful world of jump, jive, and swing guitar. Now, more than anything, more than a technique or some kind of obscure knowledge, swing really gets down to a feeling. It's how you play, it's how you move your arms and your entire body in time with the band. So we're going to explore how to play with the band, what the band members are doing, and how you fit together with them and create this layer cake we call the rhythm section. Now, before we do much of anything, we got to make sure that we're playing together, you and I. So let's tune up. I'm going to play my high E string, and I want you to tune your high E string to me. If the rest of your guitar is out of tune with that, then stop the tape, tune up, and then come on back in when you're ready to go. All right, here's my high E. You got that? Okay, now tune up if you have to, and I'll see you in a second. Now, the first thing we're going to do is look at how the rhythm section is put together. Your role as a rhythm guitar player, after all, is to work with the other musicians. You're supporting the solo, you're supporting the singer, you're complementing the piano, the drummer, and the bass player. So you have to know something about how they work together before we can really do much ourselves. So what we're going to do is take a little trip over to the bandstand here and look at each individual player and see what they do in a typical jump blues or swing rhythm feel. Okay? Check it out. The basis of the whole rhythm section lies in the kick drum, which plays on every beat. When you think of swing, you're most likely thinking of this cymbal pattern. Without this or something pretty close to it, it ain't gonna be swing. In big band arrangements, the snare drum can accent various parts of the rhythm or can emphasize the steady swing feel to really drive the band. In jump blues, the snare pattern is a hard-hitting backbeat. This is the groove that gave birth to rock and roll. The role of the bass is to outline the notes of each chord in the progression with a note on every beat. This is called a walking line. The piano typically plays a walking line in the left hand like the bass and plays upbeats in the right hand, synchronizing with the drummer and the bass player to emphasize the swing feel. Horn sections supply the color and variety in a swing or jump blues arrangement. There are endless variations on patterns like the simple, punchy riff these guys are playing right here. Now that we've seen what each instrument does individually, let's put them back together again and see what they do as a band. It's like a layer cake. It goes all the way from the 4 on the floor with the kick drum all the way up to the horn section, putting a little spice on top. So we're going to let the band build this groove up, and you'll hear each part come in and how they complement one another, and then we're going to have the whole picture ready for us to step in. Well, now that we know what the rhythm section is doing, let's figure out how we can wedge our way in there. Now you got 2 hands, I assume, if you're playing a guitar, and each hand has a very specific role. The right hand, and I'll assume for the moment that you're right-handed, forgive me if you're not, the right hand takes care of the rhythm, and the left hand takes care of everything else. Right hand is actually, it's very simple, but it's critical. When you talk about a swing feel, you want to match your right hand as closely as possible to what the drummer does. Now we heard the drummer's playing 4 beats every bar on the kick drum, playing generally 2 and 4 on the snare, that's a back beat, and then playing the swing feel on the cymbals, all right? Now, imagining that feel for a moment and singing that feel, see how close you can get, right? Somebody says, hey man, sing me a swing feel, something like this. Yeah, that sounds pretty close. Now I'm going to try to match that with my right hand before I even play a single chord here. See what this sounds like. Yeah, that works pretty well actually. And you notice that where I'm putting in accents is the same place where the drummer puts in accents. I'm accenting the 2nd and 4th beats of the bar. Now there are other ways to play accents, and we'll talk about how to accent, when to accent, when we talk about specific parts, all right? So keep in mind that no matter what we do, we're really not going to be doing too much different with the right hand. Keep it loose, strum it with your whole arm, get your whole body into it. Don't think of it as a stiff little part. It's a big strum, okay? Now, looking at the chords, I'm going to show you the basic chords that you need to play swing. And believe it or not, there's really only 2 sets of shapes that you need to know. There's a million chords on the guitar, but there's only a couple of them that you need to have to do this stuff. Notice my hand is based at the 6th fret right now. My index finger is playing at the 6th fret on the lowest string. And if I form this chord here, this hopefully will be a familiar looking one. It's a big fat major triad. It's like an E chord, right? Play an E chord down here. Take that same shape, move it up, make it into a bar chord, and there it is. Very common, very familiar chord, but not very useful when it comes to playing swing, frankly. We got to start to break that down and give it some color. First thing I'll do is make it into a dominant 7th chord. I'm not going to tell you what all these terms mean necessarily. That's the subject of harmony and theory books and videos. So just take my word for it. B flat dominant 7, first thing you do is lift up your pinky, and you notice that you introduce a new note to the chord, which makes it sound a little bit bluesier, and that's what dominant 7th chords are. They're the basic chords in blues. Now that shape right there is a pretty good one, but it's still big and it's going to take up a lot of space in the rhythm section. So I'm going to strip that one down even further and refinger it. Check this out. 1st finger, 2nd finger, 4th finger, 3rd finger. Put them all together, and I get another version of B flat dominant 7th. Now, the way that I'm fingering it, I'm muting the 5th string and the 1st string, and that's good, because when I start to play rhythm, I don't want to hear those notes, and so they're naturally not going to be part of the chord if I finger it like this. So that B flat dominant 7th chord is one that we're going to use. Here's a partner to that chord right here. Check this out. Sounds a little different, doesn't it? First thing you might notice is that there is no B flat in that chord, but it's still a B flat chord. First finger, third finger, second finger, fourth finger. That's called B flat dominant ninth. Again, the numbers have meaning, but for our purposes, we just want to know the name. B flat dominant ninth sounds a little bit more uptown. It's a little bit more sophisticated, and that's useful when you play swing. So now we got a couple of good B flat chords, and to finish our blues progression in the key of B flat, we need two other chords. That would be the fourth chord in the key, E flat, and the fifth chord, F. Every blues progression, 12-bar blues in this case, is made up of those three chords. The first chord, the fourth chord, and the fifth chord are the key. So we got the one chord covered, as they call it, and now we're looking for a four chord. Now I can form a simple E flat dominant seventh chord, which is based on this major triad shape here, which is probably familiar. I can make it a dominant chord by lifting up my third finger. Instead of barring it, I lift it up and I got first finger, third finger, first finger again, and fourth finger. That's not a bad chord, but in swing terms, it's a little square. So we're going to play a ninth chord, a more typical swing sounding chord. Second finger on the fifth string, first finger on the fourth string, and then the third finger barring the top three. Now, if that's tough for you, you can also use two separate fingers to play the third and second strings. It just takes a little time to stretch out that finger so you can bend it like that. That's the E flat dominant ninth chord, all right? That's our four chord, basically. So we got B flat, 7, B flat, 9. We have E flat dominant 9, and now to finish the progression, I need a 5 chord, so I move my finger up 2 frets. And I have F dominant 9. Now we got something to do with our left hand. Let's turn our attention back to the right hand again. Now, as I was saying, to get the swing feel going, it's really coming from the right hand, and the left hand is controlling how long you play each chord, and then you sort of bounce with your fingers as you play these chords. So to get the basic swing feel going, I'm going to play the same feel that the drummer plays on the kick drum, that is 4 beats to the bar. It's the essence of swing. It's just like disco. That's what the dancers move to. It's a simple groove. So playing that feel, I get my right hand going. All downstrokes. That doesn't sound like much yet, does it? Check this out. That's more like it. The swing really comes not from the downstroke, but from the upstroke. It's how you play that upstroke, and this takes a little bit of detail. Swing is based on triplets. That means there are 3 notes in every beat. If you really slowed it down, you get something like this. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. You take the middle note out, and you get this. That's called a shuffle. Now, when you pick up the tempo, you don't really hear that note as being so distinct, but you feel it, right? So that's where you get this. You listen to the music, you pick it up by feel, and you just grab that guitar and play with that same attitude. You don't have to count the beats, but it helps to understand a little bit, all right? Now I'm going to take my B flat chord and start to play with that feel and see what it sounds like. Now remember, in the left hand, I'm going to play the chord and then immediately release the pressure after every downstroke. Slowly. Accenting. Check this out. Now it's starting to feel like something. So it's really building up these little tiny ingredients. It's how you play with the right hand, it's bouncing with the left hand, and then the little half steps where down a fret and back up again. That all adds up to start to give it the right kind of vibe. Now we're going to apply that feel to the 12-bar progression. And so just a couple of words about the 12-bar. This is the most common progression in blues without a doubt. And jump blues is kind of at the core of swing. A lot of swing tunes were written on different types of chord progressions, progressions that really get quite elaborate sometimes. But if you understand how to play the feel on the 3 chords that you have in a blues, then you can expand as you go along and start adding other chord voicings and types and learn other tunes, okay? So we're going to stick close to home right here. Now I want to play a 12-bar in the key of B flat. We already know we got a 1 chord, a 4 chord, and a 5 chord. How long do you play them? Well, this is where you get into the variations of the 12-bar. Typically, you'll play the 1 chord for 4 bars. Then you'll change to the 4 chord for 2 bars. You'll come back to the 1 chord for 2 bars. Then you'll go to the 5 chord, to the 4 chord for a bar apiece, and then back to the 1 chord again. Now at the very end of the progression, there's usually what's called a turnaround, which is something like that, where you go back to the 5 chord again. All right? You're going to hear it when we play it. Now there are variations to that progression. The first first one you run into in the progression is this one right here, where instead of playing 4 bars on the 1 chord, you get this. 1, 2, 3, 4. What I did there was I went to the 4 chord in the 2nd bar. That's called a quick change. If you don't go to the 4 chord, it's a slow change, all right? So quick change and slow change, very important. When you get to the end of the progression, sometimes you'll go 5, 4, and back to 1, then play a turnaround. Sometimes you go 5 for 2 bars, and then go back to 1 and not play a turnaround. So how do you keep straight with all these chords? There's really only 3 of them, but the order that they go in, when do you play this, when do you play that, usually the musicians will talk it down. In other words, they'll say something like 12 bar in B flat, quick change, stay on the 5, no turnaround. Okay? That's what we just talked about. It goes by kind of quick. Takes some experience to really get it right away, but that's how it's done in a nutshell. Okay? Keep in mind, you've only got the 3 chords. Now to practice playing a progression in any tempo, you really want to work on how you get from this chord, B flat, to this chord. And so you break it down to a little exercise. Notice how my left hand, as I play the B flat chord and go to E flat, I see how my fingers move. And I want to lay them down on the new chord in a group. That's what's going to make it stay in time. Likewise, I go from the 1 chord to the F chord, B flat, F. I go from F to E flat. Those are the combinations. So you practice from one to the other until the fingers are finding those shapes more or less automatically. When do you change from 1 chord to the next? You change on the upbeat. In other words, like this. 1. Right? I hit 1. When I scrape the strings, I change my hand to the new chord, and when the pick comes back down, I'm on the new chord already. That's how it sounds smooth, and that's why it takes practice. All right? Let's practice it together, you and me. We're going to take a medium tempo B flat, 12 bar, quick change, stay on the 5 for 2 bars, no turnaround. All right? Check it out. You and me. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Smoking. Now you notice I was throwing in all the little moves there, the half steps. That's another hip one. When you change from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, for example, instead of going directly to the 4 chord, you go like this. You play a half step away from the 4 chord. It can either be above or it can be below. That way you create the illusion that you're playing a lot of chords, but you're really only playing 3 chords, and it's really only 2 shapes, right? So it's all kind of, the hand is quicker than the eye. I did that all the way through the progression. When we got to the end, I played a typical blues ending. Now you notice I didn't go to a turnaround or something like that at the end. I just stayed on the 1 chord. And that's how we end most jump blues. Even the pros that do a big arrangements will often put an ending like that on. It's just part of the common language of the style. Now, although we're playing fairly small chord voicings here, I'm still playing more than I absolutely need to in order to get the point across of what the sound of these chords are. There's a certain guitar player that developed a style that most other swing guitar players learn from. His name was Freddie Green. He had the distinction of having the longest sideman gig in the history of popular music. He was Count Basie's sideman for something over 40 years. I don't even know how long. It was a lifetime working with the same band for all that period of time. And you know what? He never took a solo. His job was to be a rhythm guitar player. And he developed a style much like what we've been doing, a little more complex, but based on the same idea, which is you move around, but you don't necessarily change chords on every beat. You're changing position, all right? Now, he played even smaller versions of the chords than we just played now. For instance, I'm playing B flat 7, and it has 4 notes in it. Now, Freddie Green would play that same chord with 3 notes in it, all right? So all you're doing is getting rid of the note on the 2nd string. You notice how compact that chord sounds. And because of the way it's fingered with the fingers sitting on the strings that aren't being played, it leaves your right hand free to hit all the strings, all right? It's going to be important. Now when you go to the E flat chord, instead of playing a full 9th chord like that, I'm only going to play the inside of that chord. I'll play E flat, that, and that. Another variation is that, where I play the same note in the bass. It just sounds a little different. It's a hipper sound. Then my 5 chord I can play with the same voicing as E flat, move it up, and again I can play it with the root or the 5th and back to 1. So you see how easy it is to shift from chord to chord because these 2 notes stay the same fingers are moving around, and all I'm changing underneath is those fingers, and it changes the whole quality of the chord. So what Freddie Green would do is he'd play on a 12 bar like the one we just did and use those little shapes, and it sounds something like this. 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the faster the tempo gets, the smaller the chords need to be in order to not take up too much space in the rhythm section. So we're going to see those chords become very useful when we do some of our examples. All right. Now I'm going to show you another little trick. This is a little bit more advanced, but it helps create that feeling again that you're really moving around the neck and playing a lot of different stuff even when you're not. Again, we'll play a quick change in B flat, and I'm going to throw a little lick in here, see if you recognize it. It goes like this. Now that lick right there started with that B flat chord that we've been playing. Different fingering here. 3rd finger, 1st finger, 4th finger, same strings. 3rd finger, 2nd finger, 4th finger, and then 3rd finger, 1st finger, 4th finger. It's really all based around the B flat chord. And then it sets you up to down to the F chord and we can keep going, which vary the progression. Go to the 4 chord, and back to 1, 4. So there's a little window into the Freddie Green style, how a guy kept going for 50 years playing a couple of little shapes like that. Not bad, huh? Now, we're going to join the band, you and me, and go up on stage, and we're going to put these rhythm styles to work. We'll play with the band on a medium tempo, B flat, 12 bar, and we're going to first start off with the chords, playing the quarter notes, chop, 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 like that. Then we're going to shift over to the Freddie Green style, use a few of those half steps, and the third time around, we'll throw in that connecting lick. See if you can get a handle on that. All right, here we go. Welcome back. How was it? Now we can do something in B flat. You know, funny enough, with those 3 chords, you can play in almost every key on the guitar, because you got 1, you got 4, you got 5. You pick a note on the 6th string and you can find 4 and 5 on the 5th string. But there are some keys that don't sound very good because they get up too high. One of them, for example, a big swing key, is E flat. We have to come up with a set of chords that are based on the 5th string. All right? First chord is real simple. It's the same chord we already used, E flat, dominant 9th, for example, okay? Now, if that's my 1 chord, I have to find a 4 chord and a 5 chord in the same key. If I count scale steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's A flat. Find the A flat on the 6th string. I can play A flat, dominant 7th, or A flat, dominant 9th, using the same shape I was using for B flat. And then in the key of E flat, funny enough, 5 chord is B flat, so we already know how to play a B flat chord. So now I can play 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, and suddenly I can play a blues based on any note on the 5th string. So basically with those 2 sets of chords, we got the whole thing covered. You can play in any key you want. The Freddie Green chords, again, you can strip them down and place them on the 5th string, E flat, there's A flat, back to E flat. Right? Really very simple. Now that we've got our keys more or less figured out, of course there are other chords you can play and variations and so on. Let's talk a little bit about tempo. We just did a couple of things at a medium tempo. One of the things that's kind of a characteristic of swing is fast tempos. And fast tempos can cause you to start to get raised blood pressure because you start to worry about what are you going to do, how are you going to keep up, you know. And it seems like the band's playing that fast, I got to be able to play faster. Not true. Here's the trick. When the band's playing at some kind of a ridiculous tempo, what you do is play half as fast as the rest of the band. So if they're going something like that, which is really hard to keep up with, then what you do is this: 1, 2. Right? I'm only playing on every other beat. Or I can just play on the back beats. I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Starts to sound a little bit like country. Or I can do another little trick here, which is to play on some of the beats and leave some of the beats open. See the idea? Now I've even stripped that chord down further. My E flat chord is now quite tiny. Move it down a half step, there's A flat. Move it up a half step, there's B flat. The faster the tempo, the smaller the chord, the more relaxed the rhythm that you're going to play. Let's go join the band again, and we're going to play a ripping 12 bar in E flat, slow change, 2-5, no turnaround. I said 2-5, right? That really means 5 chord for 2 bars. That's what the bass player plays, is 2-5. So you're going to play on the first and third beats. You're going to hear me do that. You're going to play on the second and fourth beats, and then you're going to do a little mix and match and see how it feels with this rhythm section. Here we go. Whoa, how was that? I had a hard time keeping up with that myself, if you want to know the truth. But those little tricks of playing half as much as the band will save you when you're playing at any tempo, all right? Now, we're going to talk about a couple of other techniques for playing rhythm on a jump or a swing. So far, we've pretty much laid on the downbeats, using upbeats only as occasional accents. I'm going to show you another pattern here, which is more like what the right hand of the piano does. Remember, bass in the left hand and upbeats in the right hand when we saw the piano? All right, we're going to imitate just the right hand. And we're also going to shift to a new key, the key of F. All right, another favorite of saxophone players. I'm going to show you a new chord at the same time. Now, key of F, we go all the way down to the first fret area. And this time I'm going to play on the top strings, and so I'm refingering my major triad, the big fat bar chord, using third finger, second finger, and index finger at the top. I'm going to add an extra note to that chord. Remember, the triad's a little bland for this style. Fourth finger on the second string, that's the sixth of the scale, and adding it to a triad makes an F6 chord, a real common chord that you hear in blues and in swing. Okay, so that's going to be my 1 chord. Now my 4 chord is in the key of F. It's B flat. All right, so I need to find a B flat chord. Now I'm going to go up to a familiar chord here. B flat dominant 9. Now check it out. Even though it's a big jump, you move along the neck. These 3 fingers of the F6 chord move right up. They don't change. And then you move your first finger over. Voila, B flat dominant 9. Try that a few times. And then for a 5 chord, C9, back to B flat, and back to F. Okay, so we got some hip new chords that we can use. All right, now the rhythm itself, instead of playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, like, we're going to play only on the upbeats. Okay, so it's going to sound like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now you have to imagine that the bass is playing all the downbeats and we're playing all the upbeats. It's kind of a weird feel to get used to because you get so accustomed to playing downbeats with the guitar, and this time we're doing the opposite. Use up strokes and bounce with your left hand as before so that you hit the chord real crisp. Make your shift on the upbeats. Actually, no, in this case you make your shift on the downbeats. Right? Everything is kind of opposite, okay? So file that away for a second. We're going to use that technique when we play with the band again. And at the same time, we're going to explore another style of rhythm playing, which is on the bottom end of the chord, right? The left hand of the piano is playing bass. So we're going to play bass too. And we'll first start with a typical guitar style of rhythm. It's this one right here. Now you may already know that pattern because most people that play a little bit of blues learn that pattern pretty quick. The thing that makes it swing is again in the right hand. Get your swing pattern going. Right? And as long as you got that bouncy feel in both hands, it's going to swing even though you're playing a pretty stock blues pattern. Now I can add a little variety to that one too, playing a bass line like this one for instance. Now this type of pattern is built like the bass line, built around the chords themselves. I'm playing the F, the root, going up to the next note of the F chord, the third, playing C on the 5th string, D back to C. Now, unlike our other rhythm patterns, I'm playing a pretty tight right hand here. I'm picking each note. That takes some practice, so you're going to have to work on making that shift and being able to stay in time. The exact same pattern works on B flat. C, B flat, and now we're going to take those 3 ways of playing rhythm, the upbeats, the bass, and the bass line. We're going to try those on for size with the rhythm section and see what it sounds like when we're backing up a piano solo, okay? So join me on a 12-bar slow change in F. We're going to go 5-4, no turnaround. You got it.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
How'd that one feel? That's putting a whole new slant on things. We got upbeats, we got bass lines. We're stealing from everybody, really, right? I mean, we're taking from the drummer, we just stole something from the piano player, something from the bass player. That's where you get your rhythm stuff happening. We're going to steal one now from the horn section, right? Now we got a horn section, we got a couple of guys, and they tend to play the same kinds of patterns when you listen to 100 swing songs or jump blues. It's short phrases played in unison, and they're very punchy and very rhythmic. So we're going to learn a couple of those on the guitar, okay? Now, in essence, we can use any of the chords that we've learned so far, but we're going to tend to lean them towards the high strings. In other words, the upper register, because that's where those kinds of parts generally sound the best. Now, the simplest horn pattern would be something like this. Let's go back to the key of B flat. Just take your finger, top 2 strings, and play along with me. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. How hard could it be? I'm just fingering those 2 notes. Every time I hit the notes, I release them. I release the pressure so that they're nice and short. I'm using upstrokes with the pick, and I'm playing with a lot of attack. I'm really hitting the strings hard. And you notice I'm playing the same phrase over and over again. That's the kind of phrase that will work over a 12-bar blues. You do have to change the chords to match the chords of the progression, of course, but with a 2-note phrase like that, you can really play almost the whole thing without moving. This fits the 1 chord because it's part of that B flat chord. When you go to E flat 9, the same 2 notes fit on top of the E flat 9 chord. So no need to change there. When you go to F9, you just take that shape and move it up 2 frets. This might be reminiscent of players like Chuck Berry, who listened to jump blues, learned jump blues, and then translated that style into rock and roll. This is where you get into crossover here. All right, so that's one example of a horn section style part. Now we can flesh that out using the bigger chords. We use B flat 6, for example, as our 1 chord. Nice full sounding chord. E flat for our 4 chord, and F for the 5 chord. Same kind of rhythm, like this, 2, 3, 4. Right? The extra notes kind of make the chord sound fuller. They make it sound a little bit more like a complete horn section, and that's the effect that we're going for. Notice that in between the horn hits, I keep my right hand moving in rhythm as much as possible because that's where the groove is going to come from. So I try to keep referring back to the drum groove all the time. All right? Now we've got one way to play a horn section in a key that's based off the 6th string. If I want to base it off the 5th string, key of E flat, for example, I can use my E flat dominant 9, A flat 6th, E flat 9. For my 5 chord, B flat 6, and back again. So I got 1, 4, 5, no matter where, what key I want to play in. Now, for example, taking that same idea of the E flat key and moving it up high, when I have my 2nd finger up here at the 13th fret, I've got a B flat dominant 9 chord because that note is B flat. So here's B flat down here, B flat up here. The advantage of knowing how to play each chord in 2 places is that by moving up, you create more energy. All right? So I can play my B flat chord up here and then play an E flat chord. Well, I could play this. I'll show you a real hip E flat chord. Check that out. It's an E flat dominant 7th chord with F on top. That makes it a 9th chord. So now I got B flat 9, 4 chord, and then for my 5 chord, swing land, 4th finger, 1st finger, 2nd finger, 3rd finger. That's called F9. It's another voicing. F9 here, F9 here. So now we got a whole new set of chords, and it's very swingy, jazzy sounding. It's going to give us a nice variation to play when we do horn section parts. All right? So once again, the idea, short, punchy little phrases. I can play them down low. I can play them up high. The other thing to be aware of is when you play with a real horn section, you can either play with those guys, play exactly the same rhythmic pattern that they're playing, which makes the band sound very full, or you can play against those guys. In other words, when they don't play is when you do play, and that creates this nice little kind of bouncing back and forth. So if the horns are going bop ba da bop bop ba da bop ba da bop bop ba da, there's a break on 1. That's where I'm going to play. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Bop ba da bop bop ba da bop ba da bop bop ba da bop ba da bop bop ba da. Get the idea? So there's a lot of ways to create texture in a rhythm section by working with or off of the other instruments. And that's what makes a swing rhythm section sound exciting, is when you can kind of vary your parts to suit the occasion. Okay? Now we're going to join the band again. And when we do, we're going to play a slow change blues in the key of B flat. We're going to go from the 5 chord to the 4 chord. And back to the 1, no turnaround, and check out how it works with the rhythm section. Join the fun. we're getting into the fun stuff. Let me show you a couple of more variations that you can use that are based off of ideas we've already talked about, but to really expand your range as a rhythm player. One of them is what I think of as, for lack of a better term, an inner string riff. Sounds kind of weird, but check it out. You get the idea? I'm playing everything on the second string, third string, and fourth string. In other words, the inner strings, not the high strings, not the low strings, okay? One little trick here, and this is in the key of B flat again, our favorite key by now, right? The first part of the lick requires a special move. That hammer-on, it's key, it's a big part of blues and swing phrasing, all right? What I'm doing is playing the root of the chord on the fourth string, B flat, laying my index finger down in a bar, two strings, third string, second string, and then hammering on quickly to the next fret up on the third string. Get the idea? The hammer-on is so quick, it's almost like part of the same note, but it's essential for creating the right kind of vibe. So I go like this. Lay my third finger flat, and it creates another variation in the melody. All right, another variation I can use to fatten that line up. That shape right there involves a shift, first finger on the root, third finger, second finger, still built around the same chord, but we're getting different tones in there. Another technique that I'll use is I'll pick the lower note with my pick and the upper notes I'll pluck with my bare fingers. You don't have to do that, and it takes a little work to get that down, but it does give you a crisper rhythm. Get the idea? All right. Now, if I move that kind of idea across a 12-bar progression, I'll need to vary it a little bit on the 4 chord. So I've got my 1 chord. Here comes the 4 chord. Instead of doing the hammer-on, I just keep my finger where it is. The reason is, it fits the chord, right? You can hear the difference. Back to 1. When I go to the 5 chord, I can simply go, because that fits the 5 chord. There are millions of little riffs like these that guitar players like T-Bone Walker played on practically every song they ever recorded. So by listening to these musicians, you can start to pick up ideas very quickly, but a lot of them are based around that kind of shape, okay? Speaking of T-Bone, here's a lick that T-Bone used. Yeah, it's kind of thick. That's an example of a riff, right? Horn riffs, bass riffs, we talk about riffs a lot. Common term in swing, and it means a short, repetitive phrase that you just use across the entire progression. In this particular case, what gives it a distinctive quality is the fact that it's so dissonant. That first chord there has the same quality as a diminished chord, but for our purposes, just think of it as root, up 3 frets, third finger, first finger on the second string, second finger on the third string. There's your chord, right? There's the root. Sounds real dissonant. It's supposed to. And then you go 1 chord, third finger, and come back up again, right? What makes it hip is the rhythm. Right? Now notice that I'm keeping my right hand going in that swing pattern again as much as I can because that's my groove, all right? And I'm going to use upstrokes because a lot of these accents are on the upbeats. Right? That same pattern can apply across the whole progression because it's so dissonant, it doesn't matter when you go to the 4 chord, it's still going to sound out. But that's kind of the beauty of it, if you will. All right? So we have inner string riffs, we have the T-Bone Walker riff. Another way to create interest is to more or less improvise around the chord shapes that we've been using so far. So for example, instead of playing one shape and holding on to that shape for the entire chord, like we have with the horn section part, I can slide it around. Take that B flat 6 chord, move it down 2 frets. It's still a B flat chord, but now it's a 9th chord. The magic of the guitar, right? So I can improvise a part that goes right? See, I've always got that same rhythmic feel going. I'm still following the same chord progression, but by using the half steps and sliding the chords around, I can make it sound like there's a whole lot going on. It's still really only using 2 shapes, 1 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, and 3 chords, right? So the principle is simple. The application is what takes a little bit of time. So I can play inner string riff, I can play T-bone walker, I can play kind of an improvised rhythm like that. Here's a hip one. Sometimes you'll hear another instrument pick up on a phrase, and if you copy it, suddenly you've got sort of a horn section. It can be made from any of the notes that come from any scale that's related to the key. There's no rule about exactly what it should be. It's something you pick up by ear. We're going to do an example now where we'll play with the rhythm section. I'm going to use each one of those techniques. I'm going to play a little riff. I'm going to play like T-bone. I'm going to play sort of an improvised part where I move around in time. And then I'm going to play a riff along with the saxophone while we back up the trumpet. And so in this way you're going to hear a lot of variety in how you can play rhythm guitar with and around other instruments. Check it out. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit. Everything we've done up to this point has been some variation on a standard 12-bar blues. And in a 12-bar blues, all of the chords are dominant chords, 9th chords, 7th chords, 6th chords, you know, based around that tonality. Now we're going to work out in the minor tonality. Ooh, that's dark. You do hear a lot of swing tunes played in a minor tonality. Some very famous swing tunes like Minnie the Moocher, that's going way back, Cab Calloway. Seems like every swing band had a couple of tunes that they would do in a minor tonality, and it would give the set a different kind of flavor. So we want to know something about it, okay? Now, the minor key that's most closely related to our favorite key, B flat, is G minor. They have the same, really the same basic scale in common. So we're going to learn a minor blues in G. Now the real difference is not the structure, it's still a 12-bar. It's not even the rhythm, it's in the harmony. It's the difference between that chord and that chord, right? Dominant to minor. So our basic chord sound is going to be built around the G minor chord. Now unlike the dominant chord, which has a 7th in it, when you play in a minor tonality, you don't necessarily have to use a 7th. Listen to the difference. This is a minor triad, and here's a minor 7th chord. The 7th, when used on a minor chord, really makes the chord sound quite a bit different. I think of it as kind of softening the chord, or making it sound more sophisticated. If you want a lot of drive, a lot of power, then in this case the minor triad works better, actually. So we'll use as our basic chord sound G minor as our 1 chord. When you go to the 4 chord, C minor instead of C7. Now with the 4 chord, you can use the 7th. Makes it sound a little bit different, kind of mysterious. Back to G again. We're going to throw another little twist on you here. Instead of going up to a 5 chord, which you would expect, well, the other ones are minor. I guess that one's minor too. Nope. Go up a half step. E flat, 9, and D9. Sounds kind of strange. Why would you have a dominant 5 chord when everything else is minor? Well, it's because that setup of the 5 chord to the 1 chord requires dominant to minor. It's just part of the nature of music. You're going to hear this in Beethoven just like you hear it in swing bands, all right? So most of the time in a minor blues, you're going to have minor 1 chord, a minor 4 chord, and a dominant 5 chord. And that 6 to 5 combination there is a common variation as well, all right? So now we got our chord progression. We got some basic chords. What kind of rhythm do you play? Well, basically the same sorts of rhythms we've been talking about. You play on the beat, you play off the beat, you play with the bass, you play with the piano, you play with the horn section. You know, it's all the same stuff. The tonality has changed, but the concepts remain the same, all right? Now, some of the fun stuff in a minor key is what you can do with the minor chords to make them sound out, different, all right? For example, check this. Ooh, that's dark. That's a G minor chord, but I put 2 extra notes on it. I'm going to refinger it. G, 3rd fret on the 3rd string, 5th fret on the 2nd string. For your information, that's called G minor 6-9. Aren't you glad you know that? It's kind of a spy chord. That's the way I look at it, right? You can use that for color. It makes it sound dark and mysterious. And so in minor tonalities, you'll hear a lot more of these kind of little bit outside chords. When you come to the 4 chord, you could use the same thing based off of C, right? Going to the 6 chord, on the 5 chord is where you can have some fun. Here's, instead of playing D9, I'm going to take my pinky and stick it up a fret on the high strings. And now, believe it or not, that chord is called, let me do my calculations here, this is D augmented sharp 9. Right? Now you feel like a real musician, talking musician language here. Right? But that kind of sound truly is one of the basic ingredients in creating a vibe, a swing vibe. It's a little bit more sophisticated than other styles of music. So we're going to play a 12-bar progression, and we're going to apply some of these out chords to the progression and play along with the band and sort of mix and match the rhythms that we've invented so far. Check it out. So did you get a handle on what was going on in that example right there? I played 4 different things. Again, same concept, but applied to the minor key. The horn section is playing a really strong line, you know, so you're going to have to pay attention to it one way or the other, you know, bop, 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 ba-da. So first time around, that's what I played. Right? Second time around, the bass player was playing a real hip little pattern. Now, he wasn't playing a walking line, which is what the bass players generally do on a regular 12 bar in a dominant chord key. He was playing like a riff. Now, this is the kind of style that you also hear in rockabilly. Rockabilly and swing are really cousins. Rockabilly evolved into rock and roll, swing, R&B, blues, rock. They're all partners in this musical world that we live in. And so they all trade off elements from time to time. So when I play that pattern there, instead of playing straight quarter notes, there's a little eighth note accent in there just to make it kind of rock a little bit. Same pattern goes to the 4 chord. You can hear how it follows the shape of the chord, the harmony. And then the E flat back to 1. Okay? So that was a second concept for how to play rhythm. Ordinarily, I'm not going to shift my rhythm pattern on every chorus like this. This is a demonstration, but it gives you a range of ideas that you can choose from. And when you listen to records, you'll hear guys using these pretty close to these ideas a lot. All right, the third time around, I kind of invented a part. Pretty simple, but right, kind of based around the horn section idea, but a little bit simpler. And then the last time around, the horn section came back in, and instead of me playing exactly with them, I kind of played against them. They're going bop, 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 ba-da, bop, bop, bop. There's a gap in there, right? So I picked up on that gap and I went bop, 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 ba-da. Look for a good excuse to throw in that minor 6/9 chord, give it a little bit of flavor. Same thing on the 4 chord, back to 1, E flat. Use that fancy D chord there. At the very tail end, we heard the drummer play a couple of bars and the bass player boom, 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 bubba boom. Ooh, spy chord. Now that actually is a G minor chord, although it's a slightly different animal. I'm playing G with my thumb just to give you the flavor. There's the voicing. It's G minor with a 6th and a major 7. So you call it G minor 6, major 7. Woo, that's a trip. That's not a chord you want to use exactly everywhere because it's pretty dissonant, but it's a special effect. And you hear a lot of these kind of chords on minor keys because they're kind of spooky, and that's kind of what you use a minor key for, is to create that sort of mood. All right? So we got some different colors and shapes and attitudes on a minor progression, just as we do on a dominant progression. I think we got enough to chew on for the moment. So you think you got enough to work on there? I think that's about right. A lot of different ideas. They're all built around that 4 on the floor when you get right down to it, and a little swing on the hi-hat. That's really where you start your whole rhythm concept in swing. Now, if you want to get better at the style, studying definitely helps. Learning more about changes, about harmony, about jazz, definitely gives you a better foundation as a musician. But equally important, when you get into a style like this, is listening. You have to know how the players do it by ear, because the page doesn't really tell the story. So go back and listen to the people who have influenced all the bands today that are playing in this style. For swing, for example, Count Basie. When you get into jump blues, Louis Jordan, T-Bone Walker, Big Joe Turner. There's a long list, and those are just some of the highlights of the whole style. You listen to any of them, you're going to pick up some ideas, in some cases related directly to the guitar, in other cases about how the rhythm section fits together overall, and you can find your own place in it. All right? Now, one topic we really haven't talked at all about is about soloing over this stuff. That is another whole topic, and I'd love to come back someday and maybe talk about that with you. All right? See you later.